The wind moved like judgment over the plains, low, slow, and without mercy. Dust rose in thin spirals from the trail as the wagon creaked to a halt. One wheel cracked, leaning like a busted bone against the scorched earth. The men dismounted. They didn't speak much. They didn't have to. What was about to happen had already been decided 2 nights ago, in hushed tones around a fire where the whiskey flowed heavier than conscience. One of the men, a lean figure with a hawk's face and a preacher's bark, stepped forward. He tapped the stock of his rifle against the side of the wagon bed. "This is where the trail ends for you," he said. His voice wasn't angry. It was final, like scripture carved into stone. 4 women sat huddled under a fraying tarp, their eyes crusted from sun and dust, lips split, hair tangled with prairie grit. None of them moved right away. Silence clung to them like a second skin. Then the eldest, her shoulders wrapped in a faded shawl that had once belonged to her boy, pushed herself to her feet. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from weariness. She didn't plead. She had begged 2 days ago, and that had earned her a split lip and a warning. Today, she only said, "You're leaving us to die." The preacher man didn't meet her eyes. Behind him, another settler muttered something about dead weight and too much mouth. The youngest woman in the group, a girl barely 16, her dress torn to the waist, and her left foot bound with a blood-soaked rag, looked between the men and the sky, as if searching for a reason in the clouds. There were none. One of the men tossed a canteen into the dirt. Another dropped a half-loaf of stale bread. "Ain't no place for sentiment on the frontier," the preacher finally said. "Y'all were warned what this life meant. You can't keep up, you get left. That's the law of the land." He turned, mounted his horse, and didn't look back. Neither did the others. The sound of hooves receding into the horizon was almost drowned by the wind, but not quite. The women didn't cry. There was no one left to impress with tears. The eldest, who'd buried her child just 5 weeks back under a cottonwood tree near the Missouri line, looked at the sky and then at the girl with the rag-bound foot. "We camp here tonight. Then we move." "To where?" the girl asked. "Where the land will let us." That night, the fire burned low and blue. The healer, a tall black woman whose hands had once delivered children and held dying soldiers' heads in southern battlefields, crushed herbs between her palms and muttered to herself. The girl lay curled like a papered leaf, drawing symbols in the dust with a stick. Triangles, circles, spirals, shapes she'd drawn since childhood to calm her nerves. None of them made sense to the others, but she drew anyway. The pregnant woman, who hadn't spoken in hours, stared into the flames with glassy eyes, her hand resting on the swell of her stomach like it belonged to someone else. No one asked about the child's father. In these parts, silence often told the whole story. The land around them was nothing but teeth and bones, cracked ridges, dried riverbeds, and buzzards that circled low in mocking rhythm. The healer said little, but moved with purpose, setting traps for rabbits with stripped wire and tree branches. She returned at dusk with nothing but a scratch on her arm from a thorn bush. On the second day, the girl tried to walk. She managed 10 paces before collapsing, her leg refusing to hold. The pregnant woman helped her back without a word. The eldest ripped a strip of cloth from her own skirt to change the dressing. Their movements had become quiet negotiations. Every gesture held the weight of shared grief and hard compromise. By the third night, the air grew colder. A storm brewed somewhere out west, pressing wind into the grass with a smell of iron and broken clouds. They built no fire. Not from fear, no one would come looking for them, but because there was nothing left to burn but their own clothing. The healer watched the horizon like it might speak. "The land's angry," she said. "You feel it? Ground humming like a hornet nest." "No," said the eldest, "I feel nothing." "That's worse." The girl's drawings had spread into a strange map across the earth, unspoken and half erased by wind. The symbols curved in patterns, lines that pointed nowhere and everywhere. She wouldn't say what they meant. Maybe she didn't know. On the 4th morning, a cry rose, faint and wild. A coyote? A human? No one could tell. But the healer stood and turned toward the sound with sharp eyes. "That wasn't animal," she said. "That was sorrow with teeth." They didn't move toward it. Not yet. The wind shifted that night. A chill ran under their skin as if the ground had rolled in its sleep. The pregnant woman coughed up blood in the dark, and the eldest held her without speaking, like a sister who'd been born to her late. In that moment, the firelight caught them all, hollow-eyed, dirt-caked, but breathing. Still breathing. In the dark beyond the firelight, a figure watched. Unseen. Silent. Horse tied among the brush. He had seen the camp smoke 2 days ago, barely a thread above the ridgeline. Had followed it. Now he waited. The elder Lakota scout sat like stone beneath the moonlight, his braid touched with gray, his eyes reflecting fire even from that distance. He saw women who were not enemies. He saw something else too, familiar pain, old grief, something broken in the air. He closed his eyes and listened to the land. The land for once spoke back. And the story was just beginning. The elder Lakota moved like part of the land, silent, deliberate, and dust-colored. His horse, a patient old mare with one clouded eye, stood tethered in the shadows of a broken bluff. He knelt low, fingers pressing against the soil, as if reading a language few remembered. The grass leaned wrong, trampled in clumsy haste. A ribbon of faded red fabric fluttered from a splintered bush, snagged by chance or perhaps by the land itself, unwilling to let the story slip away. He rose and turned toward the boy, who waited a few paces behind him, barely grown, eyes still too quick with questions. The boy had a name, but the elder hadn't spoken it in days. Not since they crossed into the land that remembered too much. They came this way, the elder said in Lakota, voice like worn leather. Women. The elder nodded once, slowly. Left behind. Not hunted. Just discarded. The boy frowned, jaw tightening. We take them back. The elder didn't answer. Not yet. A hot wind swept across the ridge, bringing with it the faint smell of firewood smoke and something sour, rot, maybe, or blood dried beneath fingernails. The elder inhaled sharply, closing his eyes. In the distance, coyotes called, though it was too early for them. He believed in signs. The wind, the smell, the way the birds flew crooked, these were more truthful than words. Far below, tucked in a fold of land where the grass thinned and the sky pressed heavy, the women endured. The healer stirred first, as always, her instincts older than her years. Her wound had begun to fester beneath the wrap on her arm. She peeled back the cloth to reveal streaks of angry red. With fingers crusted in dirt, she mashed wild mint and dry earth into a poultice, pressing it firm with a grunt. Pain was nothing new. The pregnant woman groaned beside her. The fever had come on hard that night, sweat soaking her shirt, eyes fluttering. The eldest sat nearby, holding a tin cup of warm creek water, coaxing her to drink. She spoke softly, though the words carried no comfort. They weren't meant to. They were a ritual, something to keep both their minds tethered. The girl, still half a child, still sketching her silent language into the dirt, sat apart. She traced lines without looking, her body swaying slightly. The drawings had changed. Less spirals, more jagged shapes. Like arrows, like teeth. No one asked what she saw when she drew them. They hadn't eaten in a day. The rabbits had stopped coming. The birds had moved on. Even the wind seemed hesitant now, circling wide around their camp like it feared what had begun to settle there. Despair had weight. It sank into the ground and made roots. That afternoon, they heard hooves. At first, they froze. Not fear, exactly, just the dead stillness of people too tired to panic. Then, the healer grabbed a stone. The eldest found the rusted iron bar they'd used to anchor the wagon wheel long ago. They crouched low, bodies tense, hearts like war drums. But the rider never came closer. The elder Lakota stayed just out of view, watching. The boy had begged to go down, but the elder held him back. Why not now, the boy had asked. They don't trust the world. That takes time to unlearn. You think they'll live long enough? The elder didn't reply. That night, the sky cracked open and spilled rain across the plains like a long overdue confession. The women didn't run for cover. They let it soak them, heads tilted, mouths open to the sky. Even the girls stopped drawing. The healer laughed once, just once, a sound so raw it made the elder flinch from his perch. In the downpour, he saw them clearer than ever. Not helpless, hardened, not broken, tested. The boy beside him whispered, "This is why we came." "No," the elder answered. "We came because the land called. They are why we stay." The next morning, they approached. The women were crouched around a tiny fire, smoke trailing like a prayer. The healer stood first, staggering, clutching her side. The eldest raised the iron bar in one hand, her body shielding the girl and the pregnant woman behind her. No words passed, just a taut silence stretched across two worlds. The elder dismounted slowly, palms open. He spoke Lakota first, then broken English. "We see you. We mean no harm." None of the women moved. The girl stepped forward. Her bare feet were blistered. Her dress stuck to her skin in patches. She extended a hand, holding a small, perfect circle drawn on bark. A spiral nested inside, the ink smudged by rain. The elder took it carefully. "You dreamed this," he said, not as a question. The girl nodded. He looked to the others. "You follow." The eldest lowered her weapon. The healer collapsed to her knees. The pregnant woman did not speak, but her hand clutched at her belly, and in that moment she looked not at the men, but at the open horizon behind them, as if weighing whether this new direction would be less cruel than the one that left them behind. They did not thank him. Thanks was a currency for people who had something left to give. By dusk, they were riding eastward, toward shaded ground and cleaner water. The elder guided the horse, bearing the healer. The boy helped the girl with the drawings mount behind him. The eldest rode alone, posture ramrod, eyes never still. The pregnant woman rode with no reins, her hands resting on her stomach, whispering something that only the wind heard. Behind them, the place they'd been slowly disappeared into shadow. Ahead, a new one waited, no kinder perhaps, but still unwritten. And someone, somewhere, had begun to whisper their names. The trail east cut like an old scar through the tall grass, half swallowed by thickets and years of neglect. The horses moved slow, careful with every step. The sun had turned mean, casting long, sharp shadows that sliced across their path like blades. Heat shimmered off the rocks, distorting everything into a kind of fevered mirage. Still, the group pressed forward, quiet, grim, holding their silence like a shield. The healer leaned against the elder Lakota, her body burning with fever. She muttered under her breath, half-words, broken hymns, names of people who weren't there. Her hands trembled as she clutched her satchel of dried roots and bark. The elder said nothing, but adjusted her weight gently, keeping her from slipping. He didn't know her language, but pain needed no translation. Behind them, the girl with the bark drawings rode behind the younger Lakota. Her arms clung to his waist, though her head remained turned, watching the empty trail behind them like she expected it to bite. The boy glanced back at her once, curious, but didn't speak. There was something in her eyes that unnerved him. Not fear, but a kind of knowing. The pregnant woman rode alone, slumped forward in the saddle, her breath shallow and rhythmic. The eldest kept close beside her, eyes flicking from tree to ridge to the curve of each valley. She'd lived too long on the edge to let her guard down now. Survival wasn't a season, it was a calling. That night, they made camp near a broken cottonwood split by lightning, its blackened trunk casting a twisted shadow across the firelight. The healer slept in a cold sweat, murmuring about water and birds, and a name no one recognized. The girl sat beside her, redrawing her spirals into the ashes, pushing the embers into patterns that made no sense, but comforted her all the same. The boy finally spoke. "What do they mean?" She looked up. "They keep things away." "Like what?" "Whatever's following us." He stared at her, unsure whether to laugh or shiver. The elder pulled him aside before dawn. "They are not ours to keep." The boy frowned. "We can't just leave them." "We won't. But understand this. Saving them doesn't end it. It begins something we don't control." The boy nodded slowly, chewing on the weight of those words. Somewhere out in the dark, a branch snapped. Not the careless break of an animal. A deliberate sound. By mid-morning, the girl stopped drawing. She whispered something to the eldest, who turned pale and urged the group to move faster. The wind had shifted again. The birds had gone silent. Even the insects had stilled. They weren't alone anymore. Far behind them, at the edge of the horizon, four riders moved like wolves, silent, quick, hunting. One had a scar across his neck that twitched when he spoke. Another wore a hat that once belonged to a preacher. Their horses bore the dust of long miles, and their eyes burned with purpose. The settler party hadn't come out of justice or guilt. They came to a race, to reclaim what they believed was theirs. The sight of Lakota men riding with their women had been enough to set their hands on rifles and hate. One of the riders, young, mean, and missing 2 fingers, spat into the dirt as he tracked the hoofprints. "They think they can just take him." "Take," the scarred one growled. "Ain't nobody ta keen. We're fixin' to bury the past." And so they followed, like rot chasing breath. By the time the firelight flickered again that night, the boy had seen the first signs: broken grass, half-hidden boot prints near the creek. He told the elder, who merely nodded and took out the knife he hadn't touched in years. "Get them ready to move before dawn," the elder said. The boy hesitated. What if they don't want to run again? Then they die. The choice was that simple. At the edge of the fire, the eldest sat with a pregnant woman, whispering stories from her own mother's mouth, of thunder spirits and prairie fires, of children born under bad moons who survived anyway. The girl lay beside them, head on the healer's lap. For the first time in days, her hands were still. Just before sleep, the boy walked over and offered the girl a carved piece of bone, a wolf's fang polished by creek water. "It's for courage," he said. She looked at it, then at him. "You need it more." He didn't argue. The storm came just after midnight. Wind first, angry, sharp, spitting dust through the trees. Then the rain, fast and cold, soaking them to the bone before they could fully rise. The elder had already packed. The healer stirred, groaning, but nodded weakly as they lifted her onto the horse. The pregnant woman clutched her side with a sudden, panicked look. "She's early," the elder said, voice flat. "She'll have to hold," the elder answered. They moved under lightning. No fire. No talk. Just hooves and breath and the press of fear in every heartbeat. Behind them, the 4 riders had closed half the distance. When the first gunshot cracked, it was a warning. Not meant to hit, just to unnerve. It worked. The second one tore through the side of the boy's horse, sending both him and the girl tumbling into the mud. She screamed, once shrill and raw, and then went silent as the boy dragged her behind a fallen log. The elder wheeled his mare around, loosing an arrow into the dark. It didn't hit, but it made the riders pause. The eldest leapt down and helped the pregnant woman dismount, leading her toward the narrow path ahead, one known only to the elder and his stories. The healer, teeth clenched against her wound, took a fallen branch and waited, crouched low, barely breathing. Another shot rang, then another. Mud, firelight, blood in the rain. The girl, face streaked with ash and tears, took the carved fang from the boy's pocket and pressed it into his palm. "I told you," she said. He nodded once, his chest heaving. "Yeah, you did." They vanished into the trees, one by one. The riders gave chase, but the land was no longer theirs. The trail curved sharp and cruel, shaped by roots and stone and vengeance older than bullets. By the time dawn broke over Hollow Ridge, only 3 riders remained. One limped, one bled. The third had lost his horse to a hidden pit carved by someone who had drawn spirals in the earth days before. And ahead, somewhere they couldn't reach, the women moved deeper into the unknown, broken but breathing, wounded but burning, alive with the fury of survival. They were not safe. Not yet. But they were not prey anymore. The broken mission rose from the ridge like the skeleton of a forgotten god. Its roof was half-caved, its wooden beams blackened by fire long past, the bell long gone. Vines crawled through shattered windows, and the altar inside was now home to nesting birds and wind-blown leaves. But it stood, alone and stubborn against the sky, and for the group staggering toward it, it was salvation or the last place they'd ever see. The elder led them into the ruined chapel just before dusk. his voice low and certain. "Stone still holds. We rest here. We fight here if we must." The healer was barely conscious, her skin waxen, her breath shallow and slow. The girl helped prop her against the back wall, beneath a crude wooden cross tilted sideways. She wrapped her in blankets and whispered to her, though the words were only sounds. She had stopped drawing. Her fingers were too cold. The boy checked the perimeter with quiet precision, placing crude snares and listening to the wind. His hands no longer trembled when he held the blade. His eyes moved differently now, watchful, tempered by fire. The pregnant woman moaned behind him, doubled over in the center of the ruined chapel. Her breath came fast, panicked. Blood soaked through the hem of her dress. "It's time," the eldest said flatly. She removed her coat, spread it on the floor, and took the woman's hands. "You want her to live, she'll have to fight for it." Thunder rolled over the prairie, low and far away. They worked through the night. The labor was fierce. The woman screamed into a blanket, bit through leather, clawed the stone floor until her nails cracked. The healer stirred only once, muttered something about ancestors, and faded again. The girl sat nearby, eyes locked on the woman's face, her own expression unreadable. She held the thong in her fist. Then, in the quiet between the storm's growls, the child came, wet, purple, furious. A girl. The eldest held her up into the dim candlelight, a triumphant, blood-slicked silhouette. "She's breathing," she said. The mother wept without sound. The child wailed. The boy smiled just for a moment. But the elder remained by the doorway, still as stone. He could feel the wind shift again, harder, sharper. The riders were close. "They'll come by sunrise," he said. And they did. The first light split the sky in pale gray. The 3 remaining riders moved up the ridge with rifles drawn, their horses stomping at the scent of smoke and death. They didn't speak. They had no more threats to bark, no more pride to cloak their violence. This wasn't about reclaiming women or righting imagined wrongs. It was about hate, pure and dry, like the land they rode over. The elder waited by the doorway, bow in hand. He had placed the boy on the southern window, where the wall had collapsed enough to give a line of fire. The girl crouched behind the altar, clutching a slingshot and a pouch of sharp stones. The pregnant woman lay wrapped around her newborn, hidden beneath floorboards broken open to reveal a shallow root cellar. The eldest stood at the front of the chapel, face streaked with ash, holding a rusted revolver with only 2 bullets left. She whispered to the healer, still unconscious, then kissed the girl's head. "You see me fall," she said. "You run. You understand." The girl didn't nod. She just gripped her stones tighter. Then the first shot rang out. Splinters flew from the doorframe, and the boy returned fire, missing wide. Another crack, this time closer. The riders were spreading out, circling. The elder loosed an arrow, hitting one in the shoulder. The man screamed, but didn't fall. He fired back, and the arrow thudded into the chapel's beam. The girl rose from behind the altar and let a stone fly. It cracked hard into a rider's cheekbone, and he reeled dazed. The eldest stepped into the doorway and fired once, striking the scarred rider in the gut. He dropped, groaning, and crawled for cover. Then a bullet struck the elder's leg, and he buckled. The boy was at his side in seconds, dragging him into the shadows. The last rider, a man with one eye and a blood-colored scarf, charged straight for the chapel. He fired blindly through the entrance, bullets tearing through wood and smoke. The eldest crouched low, steady, waiting. When he entered, she rose and fired her last shot. Click. Empty. He grinned. She didn't flinch. Then the girl leapt from behind the altar and jammed a broken plank of wood into his side. He screamed, turned, raised his rifle, and the boy buried a knife in his neck. Silence returned like a sudden drought. Dust settled. The fire hissed. And the chapel stood. By evening, the dead were burned in a pit beside the mission. No prayers were said. The healer stirred, opened her eyes, and saw the child. Her lips curled into a cracked smile. The mother nursed by candlelight, singing a lullaby that had no words. The girl drew in ash again, spirals now blooming into branches, into suns. The elder sat against the wall, his leg bound, watching them. "She'll walk 2 paths," he said, nodding toward the child. "And we'll walk beside her." The boy stood guard at the door, not because he was told, but because it was his place now. The eldest buried her revolver under the chapel floor. "Enough killing," she said. The wind outside was softer, the land quieter. When dawn came again, they didn't ride out. They stayed, not hiding, not fleeing, building. Because in a land that swallowed names and lives without care, they had done something impossible. They had survived. And in the ruin of old bones and scorched wood, something new had taken root.